collaborations between international scholars to look for solutions to global challenges together. What could be more important in this current age of the pandemic and many other challenges that the world faces together? Such collaboration was certainly the theme this year at the second annual conference between the American Institute for Indonesian Studies, or AIFIS, in collaboration with the Michigan State University's Asian Studies Center. The 5-day conference aimed to round up research proposals and connect Indonesian and international scholars so that they can collaborate together to advance research on the topic of Indonesian studies. The keynote speakers at the conference, Professor of Anthropology at the University of Toronto, Dr. Tanya Lee, and Literature and Culture Studies Professor at the University of Indonesia, Dr. Manike Budiman, both expressed the importance of international academic collaboration in this current condition of dire global challenges.
So let's start off by talking about how important is transnational dialogue, collaborative research between US and Indonesia, especially in these challenging times, Doctor?
It is important, especially today. It has been important all the time. However, few of us are aware of the importance of the collaboration between the two. And most of the time, US scholars work on their own, Indonesian scholars work on their own, doing their own research. Now, with regard to the pandemic and the post-pandemic era, I think now we have begun to be aware that collaboration in the area of research is not only important, but is inevitable. Whether you like it or not, you need to do it. Why? Because the whole world is now facing a new kind of threat to human existence.
Meanwhile, Dr. Tanya Lee expressed similar sentiments on the importance of international academic collaboration. But she also noted an issue that arises when international scholars collaborate with Indonesian scholars. Sometimes the cooperation is not on equal footing, and sometimes international scholars take advantage of Indonesian academics' need for funding.
So for collaboration to be most effective, it should ideally be between, equal parties, so that, both are fully holding to their own position, to their own knowledge, to their own strengths. And, the risk of collaborating with foreign researchers is that the foreign researcher comes bearing a research proposal, bearing money, and says, we want you, Indonesian scholar, to collaborate with us. But perhaps what they're really looking for is a research assistant, someone to help them, perhaps a native informant, but not really an intellectual partner, who will be involved in co-generating knowledge, original knowledge together. So what are the conditions of possibility for that, right? It's not an easy thing to do. There has to be an interest on both sides. I would say one of the important conditions which came quite clearly out of the discussion this morning at the lecture and the comments of the discussant, who is also my co-author, Dr. Pujo Sumadi from Gadjah Mada, is that it's very helpful if the Indonesian scholars have an excellent research training and also ideally have access to their own research funds from the Indonesian government, supplied to Indonesian universities, so that they can enter into research collaborations on an equal footing. So that's the kind of the gold standard. A lot of things called collaboration do not meet that standard, but fall somewhere, towards the more colonial end of the spectrum. And, so I think it's an interesting and important and challenging thing to engage in, really, collaborative research.
Meanwhile, another big issue that Dr. Manike pointed out is that Indonesia, as a country, is often still undermined and looked down upon in the academic world.
The underlying problem in Indonesian studies for me is the way Indonesia is approached, the way Indonesia is understood. Okay, I think we are heading toward the wrong direction. Indonesia becomes an anomaly, okay? Something that is against the grain or against nature. And no state, no matter how powerful it is, can effectively govern, manage, and sustain a vast archipelago like Indonesia with all its diversity. Okay. So the mindset, the paradigm of people doing Indonesian studies for many years seem to be that sooner or later it will collapse. Okay, it's just a matter of time. With all the crisis, with all the tragedy, with all the violence, the conflict that never ending, in Indonesia. You talk, from right after Indonesia gained its independence all the way to the present day, we never cease having, different types of problems in many different sectors. But as you correctly pointed out earlier, because of the pandemic, suddenly people see, and we prove it, that Indonesia is not only able to survive in a relatively better way than many other countries, and because of that, other countries in the world need to learn from us and stop expecting Indonesia to disintegrate. But it's more important to ask the question why, despite all the prophecies, despite all the predictions, we hold on and we survive a global disaster and we get better. We are more prepared to face the future compared to many other countries, even developed countries in the West. And that is a reason for Indonesian studies to be able to see the future that it has, okay. But also for scholars, international scholars outside Indonesia, to begin to think of how they can strategically, collaborate with Indonesia.
Having worked together with an Indonesian scholar herself, Dr. Tanya Lee knows how beneficial it is for international academic collaboration to be done on an equal footing. Currently, food security is an issue that threatens the stability of countries around the world, including Indonesia. And Dr. Tanya Lee and Dr. Pujo's research has found that Indonesia can take steps to improve its food production.
The topic of agriculture and food security right now is very, very important because, the Russia-Ukraine war is causing a global food security problem. So, on that topic, what is sort of the new research findings, or maybe the studies being done right now, telling us about Indonesia's move towards food security? Is it on the right path, or what is kind of the research saying, Dr. Lee?
Right. Yes, that's a very good question. So, Indonesia has a very long history of, on the one hand, growing rice and food for its own population, which is terribly important, although lagging behind, but also of being an exporter of crops for global markets, starting actually around 1700. Indonesian farmers began to grow coffee for the global market. They grew tobacco, cocoa, rubber, cloves, coconuts. Basically Indonesian farmers have been producers of global market crops for about 300 years. And currently, obviously, the giant one is palm oil. Indonesia is the biggest global exporter, produces a huge amount of this. So, that has a difficult relationship with food security, because some investment in growing global market crops is of course good. It produces foreign exchange and revenue for the government, but too much of it taking up too much land can actually reduce food security, because it means that so much land is given to one global market crop that local farmers no longer have a space to grow a variety of crops, including food. So what we were looking at is the massive expansion of corporate plantations. So Indonesia now has 22 million hectares of land, which has been granted to corporations for the production of oil palm. Yeah. And that is 1/3 of Indonesia's total farmland. That's a massive amount of land to dedicate to one crop and also to put under corporate control, and a risk in terms of food security, right? 22 million hectares now under corporate control for oil palm is not being used by local farmers for growing food and a variety of cash crops, right? It's become monocropped, it's become corporate, and it's removed from the control of the local farmers who previously used it for growing things like rice and perhaps some rubber and this and that, but basically, a mixed and balanced variety of food and cash crops has been replaced by one monocrop. And these corporations, about half of them are multinationals.
Indeed, the overwhelming corporate control of palm oil and cooking oil industries has been problematic and touted as the issue behind the recent surges in cooking oil prices in Indonesia. According to the Indonesian government, such companies have allegedly been banding together to hold back supplies and purposely keep prices high. Certainly, both government efforts and academic research can help find solutions going forward to help ensure low commodity prices in Indonesia and ensure food security in the country.